Hello there, and welcome back to another weekly vlog from Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you again for tuning in. We've got a few updates to talk about this week, so as always, we're just going to go ahead and jump straight into things here and waste no time at all. So things that I want to speak about today include what happened over the last week, so the various posts that I released, blog posts, videos, etc. Also talking about Azure-ish Live, because that was very fun and I want to give those guys a shout out. Also looking what's coming up over the next week, including things like Azure Thames Valley, where we have our first session. Also what's coming on the horizon for Cloud with Chris. I'm working on a new website actually, so I want to go and showcase that. And then also just some of the news that's going on, particularly paying attention in the DevOps space this week, as there's been some interesting, not announcements, but news, I guess, in terms of some attack vectors that people are using from a dependency perspective. So it's actually quite an interesting scenario to bring up. So that's what's top of mind today, so we'll waste no time, as I say, and we'll just move across over to the screen here. So first up, what happened over the last week? So last week was weekly vlog number 6. Today is weekly vlog number 7. Almost 2 months of doing a weekly vlog, so the rhythm is going well so far. And last week we talked about things like the Azure Architecture Center, we talked about the DevOps blog, the GitHub blog, and that included things like Project Bicep, the kind of new, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Evolution. Evolution of ARM templates there. As well as things like Delivery Plans 2.0, which I think is a great set of updates there. Then on Wednesday, I did another blog post, this time talking about how you can go ahead and contribute into GitHub Actions, or the Azure GitHub Actions, I should say. So one of the things that I've been doing as part of my current role is working with that team on how we can get more samples out there that use these Azure GitHub Actions, as well as refining and enhancing some of the documentation that is there today. Now, the point really of this blog post is to raise awareness, because the docs themselves, the actual samples themselves, they're all hosted on GitHub. So there's no reason that it has to be, myself, because I'm a Microsoft employee, who has to go and work on that. It's open source, so anyone can go and contribute into that. And I know the team are really starting to rally the community behind some of that content. So if you're interested, if it's a passion area for you, take a look at that blog post, and I'm more than happy to chat about my experiences getting involved and working on that as well. But I know they're certainly interested in getting more community efforts involved there as well, so certainly check that one out. Now, of course, that was Wednesday. On Friday then, also released another episode of the Architecting for the Cloud, one pattern at a time, and this one was with Will Eastbury once again, and we were talking about the publish subscriber pattern, the priority queue, and the pipes and filters patterns. So a few different patterns there that we talked about, all really focused around messaging and enterprise integration patterns. So that was, I think, a really good session. Really enjoyed doing that one. It was a lot to get through in a short space of time. So if there's any feedback, anything you want us to kind of dive a bit deeper on, do let us know, because no doubt we'll be interested in doing that. Now, the other thing that happened last week was I was also on Azure-ish Live as a guest on Wednesday. So I joined Liam Gulliver and Pete Gallagher on the show. And this is where we go ahead and talk a little bit about technology. And then we also go ahead and play a little bit of Among Us as well. Had a lot of fun, and I'm sure, no doubt, that I will love to be back on that show again. So if I can find an excuse to talk about something else, I would love to be back on there. So thank you both once again for having me on that, because, as I say, a lot of fun. Any excuse to play Among Us and talk about technology, I am absolutely there. So yeah, and a shout out to you both, because I think the show is really good. I've been kind of following and tracing the the journey you've been on in terms of going from a few shows now to having, I think, one show every day, or most days now. So it's a really awesome evolution there. So kudos and congrats to yourselves there. Really well done. So next up is really then talking about what's top of mind for the future there. So here we go. I'm going to change over to myself for a moment just before we start looking through this site. But for anyone listening in, what I'll be showing over this kind of next segment here is something that I've been prototyping. So if you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, you may have seen that I posted, I think last week, a couple of images as kind of renders, markup of what I was thinking of designing, what was in my head, and now I've started prototyping that and integrating that into Hugo. Of course, I've spoken about Hugo many times. I'm a big fan, but now I'm taking that to the next level and really trying to get that V2 of my website out there. So first thing you'll spot is it's very much on brand in terms of the Cloud with Chris kind of branding that I've got, and I'm really trying to make it work for me in the content that I'm pushing out there. So I think the theme that I was using already, the Castanet theme, is awesome. So kudos again to Matt Stratton. I think some great work on that theme, but I wanted to kind of evolve that slightly and really move it towards the branding that is with Cloud with Chris there. So inspired by some of the work on the Castanet theme, I haven't really changed any of the markup underlying that the actual documentations of the episodes, the content, etc. are using, but the actual layouts themselves is really what I've been focusing on, where I built some other Hugo themes, for example. So as you can see, very much on brand, and then when you get on that landing page, the first thing that you see is the upcoming content. So of course we're filming V007 right now, compute resource consolidations coming out later, and then the next weekly vlog next week. Maybe I'll start including things about guest appearances where I'm on other shows as well. This is really the start of the evolution of me really making this a hub for my content. But as we scroll down, you can see, for example, the latest show that was there. We saw a moment ago the pub sub priority queues, pipes and filters pattern video. And then you can see a load of content underneath that. So you can initially see the tags there, you can see who the host is, the guests, etc. You can see, for example, it's not just episodes that are being listed, it's also blog content as well. So I'm really trying to make this a hub for all of my content, not just for the episodes that I'm releasing. So as I mentioned, if I'm kind of guest appearing on any episodes there as well, maybe I'll put a tag there for guest and figure out a way to do that. So still a lot of ideas happening here, so keep a watch for this. What else? If we go and navigate maybe to one of the guest pages here, you'll see that we have a nice experience in terms of displaying who they are, their various social media profiles, and then the various episodes that are there as well. It's of course mobile friendly as well, so I'm not going to do that right here because of the recording, but if you go and collapse the site down and view it on a smartphone, a tablet, or just in a monitor that's maybe a little smaller, you will get that nice rendered UI. Still have a few bugs, particularly with the rendering of the episodes in those small UIs, which I'm kind of working on, but as I say, work in progress there. So then very much have, the content about the show, about my Cloud with Chris brand, etc. Content are on the blog as well. And any of those tags, for example, you can go ahead and click on those. So see, for example, all of the content, not just the episodes or the blogs, but all content that has been tagged with that. And then also, for example, you can do the same thing with the series as well. So I can go and see all of the episodes which have content relating to one of the series. Now, one of the things I do want to go ahead and click on one of the episodes, because this one I'm pretty pleased with actually. So before Christmas, I got reached out actually by a company called Podscribe. And what they do is they use artificial intelligence to go and pull out the transcript from a podcast. Now, yes, there are many services available out there, like cognitive services. I know Stream does it, of course YouTube does it in their videos, etc. as well. But I particularly like how Podscribe render this for you and allow you to play it back as well. So if I just switch back to the screen here, you'll see that I have embedded in the site here is the transcript from Will and my session back last week. But what I can do, for example, is I can click anywhere on this particular page and it will go and highlight as they're talking through the various bits and pieces that we're talking through. So you may have remembered a while ago I talked about the importance of having transcripts on the pages for accessibility reasons, something I'm super passionate about. Really, I just couldn't keep up with that. The volume of content that I'm pushing out, the time it takes to do that. This is my solution for that. So I think it's a great service that these folks are offering. And you know, I only just subscribed, so I'm looking forward to getting the rest of my content transcribed by the folks working with them. So just a shout out to those folks, and I'll keep you updated as I use the service a bit more, and any feedback that I find out about it, I'll be sure to share. But that's really what has been worked on so far in terms of the website. So you can see quite a refinement in terms of what I've had today, very much on brand, very much bringing some of those concepts which are important to me and to the show as well. And one final thing that I really wanted to get across on there as well is on the episodes pages, or the upcoming episodes, or I think guests as well actually, you can see at the top there the banner. It lists a number of different speakers, you know, just showcasing people we've had on the show and showcasing the fact that anyone can be a guest on the show and sign up. So if I open that link in a new tab and go next, that will take you to the Sessionize page where you can go ahead and sign up and be a guest on the show, and we can get you scheduled in. So again, really focusing on that community effort, really focusing on the branding, really focusing on the accessibility, and this is something I'm going to keep refining upon as I get towards the minimum release for V2. So stay tuned, and if you have any feedback, v2.cloudwithchris.com, you can go and access it. It is live there. I'm not going to be keeping both sites up to date in terms of content. This is really for mock-ups until I release it. So please let me know. Would love to have that feedback. Cool. So next up then, let's go ahead and jump straight into the news for this week, because we're already running, I think, about 15 minutes roughly or so in here, so a little bit of a longer session this week. First off, only a couple of posts really to highlight on the Azure blogs this week. One of them is to do with dangling DNS protection. So if you're not familiar with dangling DNS protection, imagine a scenario where you've spun up a web app, for example. Now you've gone ahead and maybe you've deleted that web app for some reason. Maybe it was a POC, maybe you no longer need it. You've decommissioned the service that was behind it, for example. And what you go and do is you forget to deregister or unregister, however you want to say it, the CNAME record that you have to that Azure website. So think about the problem there. At that point, anyone else can go ahead and spin up an Azure App Service, and because you've got a domain name record pointing to that app service, they could go and potentially spoof what you're doing there. So there is a challenge actually with that, and this is the dangling DNS problem. So really the idea behind Azure Defender for App Service is it's introducing this check for this dangling DNS protection, and you can see some of the mock-ups of that, for example, in the blog post there. So definitely something to be aware of and check for, because again, that's quite a nice backdoor way of being able to spoof and do something with your DNS records that you probably had just completely forgotten about. So do be careful about managing those, really, is the guidance and the feedback there. Next up, not really something I'm going to delve right into, but just thought it was quite cool, was this blog post from Tom Keene, who leads Azure Global inside Microsoft. And really what this is about is bringing Azure to the International Space Station. So I think when we talk about edge computing, that is really at the frontier, right? That is the true edge. And just a really interesting story how with HPE, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, they're taking Azure to the International Space Station. So just an interesting read if you hadn't spotted that blog post. They talk about things like being able to do weather modeling from dust storms for future missions to Mars, hydroponics and plant analysis. They talk about medical imaging. So again, really involved in that scientific discovery there. Really, really interesting use case, and just a good blog post to go and read. So next up then as well, we have the Azure updates in terms of not the blogs, but just some feature updates that are new and worth being aware of. So I'll just quickly scroll through these and let you know what they are if you're listening in. So GA of soft delete for Azure file shares is now on by default for new storage accounts. OCR support for 73 languages in Cognitive Services Computer Vision public preview, Power BI Embedded Gen 2 public preview, Azure Automations now in Japan West, GA of ingest up to 10 files and blobs with the new Azure Data Explorer intuitive UX, GA of Azure Mobile support for Azure Gov. Versions are no longer required for Key Vault references in App Service and Azure Functions. Databricks achieves DoD Impact Level 5 on Azure Gov. There's a new data center region planned in Georgia, which will be East US 3. Azure Backup for SAP HANA, the soft limit has been increased from 2 terabytes to 8 terabytes. Azure Cost Management and Billings cost allocation is now available in Azure Gov, and Azure Cost Management is now available in Azure Gov for pay-as-you-go subscriptions as well. So a few, I guess, categorized areas of updates this week. You can imagine looking at that. So actually, I don't think there's anything particularly to update on. I think all of those were pretty self-explanatory from the updates. So go ahead, take a look at the Azure Updates page if you are interested in that. Next up then, the Azure DevOps blog. This one we do have a little bit to update on this week. So first off, we will just switch over to, actually we won't just yet. The first thing we'll take a look at is I think these are, oh yeah, no, this is all good. First one is the continuous monitoring for web performance and accessibility. So this is a video, 16 minutes long, worth taking the time investment, where they talk about how you can go and, as part of your DevOps processes, go and focus on web performance and how accessible your sites are. This is something where I've actually been really interested in improving this, where I've been working with Hugo recently. So when I made the Hugo community theme, the Lighthouse API that they reference in this particular post is something that I used. It's really it's a great service. It's something that you should absolutely go ahead and use inside of your pipeline if you're doing any kind of UI driven work from a web basis. But they also talk about things like Axe Core, hopefully I pronounced that right, for accessibility monitoring as well. So I'm interested in exploring that one a bit more. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but that is on my radar, especially with Cloud with Chris V2 coming up as well there. What else in terms of Azure Artifacts? Now, there have been some changes to the upstream behavior. I'm not really going to focus on this particular blog post so much. If you're interested, it's worth just reviewing that to understand the changes of those behavior. But what I want to talk about is the why behind it. So you may have seen on Twitter and in some of the tech news articles recently, there's been an interesting not quite vulnerability, but way of circumventing the way that you would expect things to work. Maybe I wouldn't even say circumventing, to be honest. I think there's been maybe an approach that hasn't been necessarily followed by a lot of developers. So what I'm referring to here is, for example, with NPM packages. With NPM packages, you can go ahead and, of course, go and depend on a public repository, for example, or a private repository as well. But what happens, for example, if you're depending on a private repository something that is in there doesn't exist in the public repository. It's fine, that's all good. But what happens if someone goes ahead and releases the package with the exact same name to a public repository? Well, if you hadn't used the scoping approaches for using NPM packages, then what would happen is exactly what has happened with a number of different companies where these security researchers have gone and tested this out, is it will go and prioritize the upstream packages first. And that's what some of those changes are to the Azure DevOps or Azure Artifacts way of working, is not doing that. And again, you can go and read through that. But this white paper goes ahead and just explains some of the risks of this hybrid configuration using these kind of upstream sources, these private sources as well. And really it's all to do with supply chain and being able to infiltrate the supply chain of a particular organization. So this is just a really interesting way of actually being able to attack an organization. Go ahead, just read through some of the news that has come out around this. It's good just to be aware of this and then be able to understand, have you actually protected against this? Have you mitigated this already? Or is this something that where you potentially have some exposure to and you need to go and take some action against that? So do go ahead, take a look at that, because as we've mentioned several times, the supply chain approach is quite an advanced and clever way to get into the software. Just think, for example, I think it was SolarWinds, wasn't it, where there was some kind of supply chain injection as well. So making sure you do all the right things, the earlier stages, and think about that DevSecOps process is very important there to make sure you deliver that application and that value to your end users in a safe and secure way. So what else have we got then? There was another post by Damien Brady, and this one is all about the Azure DevOps demo generator. So this is something I have been using for years. It's been around for some time, but a lot of people don't know about it. So the Azure DevOps demo generator, pretty much what it says on the tin, it's a way of you being able to easily generate projects for an Azure DevOps organization. It's good because it's a kind of a known baseline. If you want to go ahead and spin up some new projects, you could use that. You don't have to, of course, but there are some templates there available, including some, for example, with the Cloud Adoption Framework. So if you think about migrating virtual machines, you need some kind of templates or structure. There might be some examples there that can go and help you, some demos there that can go and make that a little bit easier for you to go and start along that journey as well. So go ahead, take a look at that, because this Azure DevOps demo generator is a nice tool. I believe it's, as I say, it's been around for some time. You can find the project on GitHub. So go ahead, if you're interested in contributing back as well, or reviewing the code that's up there, you can go ahead and do that. And one other thing I wanted to call out on the Azure DevOps side of things, something I've seen a lot of people go and ask for, is a way to pragmatically go and generate personal access tokens, or to go and manage them. And that is now in private preview. So if you want to get access to that or the documentation, Angela Wong is the product manager there for that, who's posted that blog post, and they ask that you reach out to them. There is a link there to, I think, an email address to go and email the program managers. So if that's of interest, if that's something that's been blocking you for some reason, go ahead and reach out there. And then finally, on the GitHub side of things, again, not too much to update on this side. There's another good blog post here, again, on the security side of things. So I've mentioned a few times that GitHub are doing some great things with DevSecOps, and what they're talking about here are things like the CWE and CVSS scores, being able to get some context on your security advisories, so being able to have a little more control around that. So that is, again, a nice addition that you can go ahead, if you're using GitHub, go ahead, take a look at that. And then once again, talking about this NPM substitution, or as some are calling it, dependency confusion attacks. and what I like about the way GitHub have done it is they've put a TLDR, too long didn't read, at the top of the screen there as well. So use scopes for internal packages, use a .npmrc file in the root of a project to set the intended registry, take care when proxying, and respond quickly to build failures. So, all sensible approaches there to consider. But again, I think this is going to be getting a lot of focus across other folks across the industry who host these kind of npm packages, so do be aware of this. Again, this is something that has come out over the last week. Good to be aware of that. And one final thing that I just wanted to show here as well is the Azure Thames Valley group. So I'm just loading that up here. What you can see is we have the Azure Storage Minefield session coming up on Wednesday. So this is our relaunch session. We're going ahead and launching this on Wednesday, the first time that we're hosting a session. First time I'm hosting an Azure Thames Valley session, but Azure Thames Valley as a whole, I think, in about a year or maybe more. And you can see that we've already got our next session lined up as well around security and compliance. And we actually have April and I think May and even June already set up. We're just getting some of the content launched. But Wednesday is the date where we go live with that event. So if you're interested in coming along and joining us, it will be virtual. What you can go ahead and do is go to the meetup group or go to www.azurethamesvalley.com, click on the appropriate event. That will take you to the meetup group. Then what you need to do is just select going and you'll get access to the virtual link then that we'll be using to run the session on Wednesday. So Wednesday, 6:30 GMT, you're very welcome to come along and join us. So please go ahead and do so, because I think we've got a really good session there from Matt. So yeah, it's going to be a really, really good session. Good. So otherwise, I think that is probably us there. So in terms of wrap up, we've talked all about what's coming up, what's happened. We've talked about some of the news pieces that are going on as well. And as always, as a reminder, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts, whether you go ahead and listen on Google Podcasts, for example, whether you go ahead and listen on Spotify, or whether you go ahead and listen on cloudwithchris.com, there is a platform for you. I am trying to be inclusive. I am trying to make sure that we, reminding people that we have audio listeners as well, remembering that feedback from the Apple podcast. So thank you for providing the feedback, and I do appreciate your feedback. As always, please go ahead, like the episodes. If you're listening on any of those platforms, you can subscribe, and if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know as soon as there's new content available for you. And of course, v2.cloudwithchris.com. I would love your feedback on that. So if you're interested, if you're a UI expert or UX expert, I'd love the feedback, because I do want to make sure it's accessible and that it is really on brand with Cloud with Chris. So thank you again for tuning in, and until next week's episode, stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and bye for now.